What price does a small land pay when caught between empires? Why has this rugged terrain drawn conquerors for thousands of years, as if its very soil held secrets worth dying for? What hidden forces stir beneath the shadows of its towering mountains? Before we journey through this tale of struggle and survival, brace yourself for a story where every decision echoes through centuries, reshaping fate itself. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, like it, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. In the meeting place of jagged mountain ridges and the vast sea, where vineyards climb so high they pierce the clouds, lies a land known by many names. Some called it the Golden Land, others the crossroads of civilizations, and yet others the eternal battlefield. This is Georgia, a country no larger than half of England, yet a crucible of history where culture and conflict collide. Georgia's name, as we know it, came through Persian and Russian tongues, but the true soul of this land predates these labels by millennia. Before these names traveled the winds, ancient kingdoms thrived here. Colchis, Iberia, Lazica, names that sound like incantations, each a chapter of myth and blood. Colchis, nestled on the eastern shore of the Black Sea in the valley of the Rioni River, wasn't a mere legend, but a powerhouse of early civilization. Its people were master metalworkers, shaping bronze and extracting gold in an age long before the Trojan War. How did these ancient craftsmen catch gold? With sheep's skins dragged through mountain streams, catching grains of pure gold. This was the origin of the Golden Fleece, technology turned myth, and myth born from the wealth of the earth. But Colchis was no isolated outpost. It was a thriving hub of commerce and culture, where Greek traders built cities like Dioscuriata, modern-day Sukhumi, and Phasis, today called Poti. These bustling ports were gateways between east and west, pulsing with the voices of many tongues. Imagine caravans laden with silk, spices, slaves, and weapons crossing these lands, their paths carved by necessity and ambition. Farther inland, beyond the Suvrun Pass, the kingdom of Iberia rose, a land of warriors and winemakers, looking not to the sea, but to the mountains and steppes. The heart of Iberia lay in the valley of Kur, where modern Tbilisi stands today. Here, kings like Pharnavaz, Saurmag, and Mervan forged a realm of stone fortresses and horse-riding warriors, caught in the relentless struggle against northern nomads and neighboring empires. But Iberia's story deepens with faith and sacrifice. In the year 324 AD, a woman named Nina arrived, a fugitive from Cappadocia, carrying a cross woven from grapevine. Her mission was the seed of transformation, to plant Christianity's shield over a land battered by war and shifting allegiances. Iberia embraced this new faith long before Rome declared it official, forever altering the course of its identity and destiny. This tale is more than chronicles of kingdoms and battles. It is the relentless saga of a people who survived the firestorms of empires, rebuilt from ruins time and again, and held fast to their faith amid chaos. What compelled this small nation to endure such savage tides? What sacrifices did its inhabitants make to be called Georgian? Every choice here was a turning point, every alliance a gamble with fate. The story of Georgia is a story of irreversible decisions. From ancient kings who built walls against invaders to the common people who harvested grapes on steep slopes high above the clouds. It is the story of gold that gleamed like a beacon and faith that shone as a shield. It is a history where every moment rippled with the tension of survival, and every breath was drawn in the shadow of looming empires. And it all begins with the land itself, the crossroads, the battlefield, the everlasting forge of identity. What would you do if your entire nation's identity hinged on one fleeting moment of faith and survival? How far would you go to defy empires crushing your land? And what if one man's blindness sparked a revolution that would echo for centuries? Nina, the woman bound by her own hair, preached in Mutsqueta, the ancient capital of Iberia. She healed the sick, cast out demons, and converted pagans. Her fame reached the ears of King Mirian III. Then, during a hunt, the king suddenly lost his sight, a darkness that no god seemed to lift. Desperate, he turned to Nina's god, and his vision returned. With that miracle came a command to baptize the people. Iberia became Christian, and nothing would ever be the same. But this was no mere change of faith. It was a gamble on survival in a world of empires. Christianity became the bedrock of Georgian identity, a lifeline in a landscape where borders were erased and rewritten with blood. This faith was their shield against assimilation, the spark that kept their resistance alive. Yet, standing at the crossroads of empires, Georgia's fate was precarious. Surrounded by towering mountain ranges, seas, and endless steppes, every empire hungry for control had to cross Georgian soil, and every march cost the people dearly. From the south came the Persians, relentless and demanding. From the west, the Romans and Byzantines pressed. From the east and south, the Arabs surged like wildfire. Turks encircled from all sides. Mongols thundered in from the east. Russians lurked from the north. Georgia was a bridge over which armies marched, each crossing, erasing fragments of its soul. After Rome's collapse, Iberia was caught between two giants, Byzantium and Persia. The Georgian kings danced a deadly game, pledging loyalty to one empire, then the other, trying desperately to cling to nominal independence. One misstep meant erasure, not just of borders, but of existence itself. In the 5th and 6th centuries, Iberia was a Persian vassal, yet stubbornly clung to Christianity and its autonomy. But Persia demanded more: embrace Zoroastrianism, abandon customs, become one with the Sassanid Empire. The Georgians resisted fiercely. Their defiance sparked rebellion, rivers of blood, and ruin across the land. Then, in the 7th century, a new force swept through: the Arabs. Conquering Persia, Syria, Egypt, and North Africa, they advanced like an unstoppable firestorm. In the year 645, Arab armies invaded Georgia. Resistance was brutal but futile. Tbilisi fell. Mutsqueta fell. Georgian princes bowed to the caliphate, paying tribute and burying their dreams of freedom. 2 centuries of darkness followed. Cities pillaged, churches razed, people enslaved. Yet the spirit of Georgia refused to die. From mountain fortresses, the people preserved their faith, language, and culture, waiting for the moment to rise again. That moment came in the late 9th century. The Arab Caliphate weakened, torn apart by internal strife. Provinces broke away one by one. Seizing opportunity, Georgian princes began to unite through war and marriage. Tau Clargeti, Kakheti, Hereti, Abkhazia, all merging into one. Into this crucible stepped Bagrat III, a scion of both Abkhazian kings and Kartli princes. He inherited fragmented realms under Muslim control and forged them into a Christian kingdom once more. The rebirth of Georgia was underway, but the path was treacherous. David the Builder followed Bagrat's legacy, ruling for 13 years after the decisive Battle of Didgori. He revived the economy, built monasteries, and patronized arts and sciences. Under his reign, the Gelati Academy rose as one of the greatest intellectual centers in the Caucasus. Prosperity returned, but it came forged in the fires of war and sacrifice. When David died in the year 1125, he was buried at the gates of Gelati Monastery, so every visitor stepping inside would tread upon his grave, a constant reminder of the sacrifices that forged their nation. But the question remained, could Georgia survive the next wave of storms on its horizon? Or would it be swallowed whole by history's relentless tides? What does it mean to serve your people beyond death? David's last will was a solemn vow, to serve his nation even after his final breath. His heirs carried this torch forward, but it was George III who pushed the borders even further. Yet the true dawn of greatness awaited under the reign of his daughter, Tamar. Tamar ascended the throne in the year 1184, shattering medieval norms as Georgia's first female ruler. In a time when gender equality was a distant dream, she held power with an iron will, transforming Georgia into a sprawling empire. Her kingdom stretched from the Black Sea to the Caspian, from the northern Caucasus to the Armenian highlands. Under Tamar's command, Georgian armies marched into Persia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. She was not merely a monarch, she was a living symbol. Poets sang her praises, legends were born in her name. The greatest Georgian poet, Shota Rustaveli, immortalized her in his epic, The Night in the Panther's Skin. Rustaveli's masterpiece spoke of friendship, love, loyalty, and honor, values steeped in the chivalric spirit of the age. He wrote, "What you give is yours, what you keep is lost." These words echoed the soul of an era where Georgia flourished, generous, strong, a beacon of Christianity on the Muslim East. Fortresses and monasteries rose under her watchful eye. Refugees found shelter. Merchants found safe passage. But even the brightest golden age cannot last forever. A dark shadow loomed from the east in the early 13th century, an unstoppable force that would swallow half the world. The Mongols. Though Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire's relentless expansion continued. Mongol hordes swept through Central Asia, crushed Khwarezm, and invaded the Caucasus. In 1222, they first appeared on Georgian soil. The Georgians fought back, But resisting the Mongol onslaught was like trying to hold back an avalanche with bare hands. The Mongols showed no mercy. They burned cities, slaughtered populations, destroyed crops. Tbilisi fell, looted and broken. By then, Timur was gone, and Georgia plunged into chaos. For the next century and a half, the country languished under Mongol yoke. Kings remained on thrones, but they were puppets. Real power belonged to the Mongol Khans. Georgians paid tribute, supplied warriors for Mongol campaigns, and endured brutal oppression. Yet even the Mongol grip was not eternal. By the 14th century, the empire fractured, giving rise to new powers. One of these was the Empire of Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, a Turkic conqueror obsessed with reviving Genghis Khan's legacy. He conquered Persia, Central Asia, India, and invaded Georgia 8 times. Each invasion left Georgian lands ravaged. Timur spared no one. Fortresses were razed, monasteries burned, vineyards destroyed. Georgian kings tried to negotiate, to buy peace, but Timur demanded submission to Islam. The Georgians refused, and Timur returned again and again. When he died in 1405, Georgia lay in ruins, its population decimated, cities shattered, central authority weakened to the point of collapse. The kingdom fractured into several realms, Kakheti in the east and Meretti in the west. Each was fragile, vulnerable, prey to new predators. In the 15th century, the Ottoman Empire rose to the south. They seized Constantinople in 1453 and pushed northward into the Caucasus. Simultaneously, Persia, united under the Safavid dynasty, advanced from the east. Georgia found itself trapped between two empires, like grain caught between millstones. And those millstones began to grind mercilessly. Ottomans and Persians waged brutal wars over the Caucasus. Georgian kings swore allegiance to one side, then the other, desperate to survive. But every oath demanded a price. The Ottomans demanded slaves. The Persians demanded hostages. The Georgian people were caught in a deadly game of survival, their fate shaped by impossible choices and unyielding forces. The question remained, how long could they endure before everything was lost? What does it mean to face annihilation, to have your land bleed, your people torn apart? Georgia in the so-called Black Centuries was a country sinking into darkness. Boys were taken to become janissaries. Georgian girls sold into harems. The population dwindled to mere hundreds of thousands. Roads grew wild with weeds. Cities shrank to villages. Villages turned to ashes. Yet Georgia refused to vanish. Amidst ruin, the people clung fiercely to their faith, language, and traditions. Every Sunday they gathered in churches. Every spring they planted vineyards. Every winter children were told stories of King David the Builder and Queen Tamar, symbols of a golden age long past. Hope lived in memory, fragile but alive. This hope fanned the search for allies beyond the mountains. In the 18th century, Georgian kings turned their gaze northward, beyond the Caucasus peaks. There lay the Russian Empire, a Christian power, a sworn enemy of the Ottomans and Persians. Could Russia be the protector Georgia so desperately needed? Embassies journeyed to Moscow and St. Petersburg, pleading for defense, offering alliance. But Russia hesitated, wary of the distant, perilous Caucasus. Why risk entanglement? Everything shifted with Russia's southern expansion at the century's close. Desiring control over the Caucasus to secure its borders and access the Black Sea, Russia moved decisively. In 1783, the Treaty of Georgievsk was signed. Georgia accepted Russian protectorate, promises of defense in exchange for allegiance to the Russian Tsar. Autonomy remained, but sovereignty was compromised. This was a fateful choice. Some Georgians rejoiced, finally a strong protector. Others feared a new form of bondage under Russian rule. Both fears proved true. Early on, Russia did shield Georgia, but their aid was not always swift. When Persian Shah Aga Muhammad Khan invaded in 1795, Russian troops failed to arrive in time. Tbilisi fell, ravaged and bloodied. Tens of thousands were slaughtered or enslaved. The horror marked the final catastrophe of an independent Georgia. King Erekel II died soon after, leaving a frail heir, George XII. Desperation forced the new king to petition Russian Emperor Paul I for complete protection. Paul agreed, but on his terms. Georgian nobles, accustomed to independence, rebelled. Their uprisings were crushed. Russian troops seized key cities. The Georgian church lost its autocephaly, subordinated to the Russian Orthodox Synod. The nation was fragmented, its identity suppressed under imperial rule. For the next century, Georgians lived as subjects of the Russian Empire, a paradox of progress and loss. Russia established a multi-party parliament, and Georgia emerged as one of the most advanced regions in the post-Soviet space. Yet independence was fragile, threatened by enemies on all sides. Turkey to the southwest, Denikin's White Army to the north, Bolsheviks in Russia, their shadows darkened every border. Georgia's government walked a razor's edge, signing treaties, seeking recognition, fostering trade. Britain and France extended de facto acknowledgement. The young republic seemed poised for survival. But the Bolsheviks viewed Georgia as an aberration, an obstacle to their revolutionary ideology. The world revolution could not halt at Georgia's borders. In February 1921, the Red Army unleashed its assault, invading Georgia. The fragile dream of independence shattered under the iron boot of Soviet power. The fate of a nation, sealed by a chain of irreversible decisions, plunged into darkness once more. What does it mean when a plea for help is nothing but a thin veil for conquest? When Georgian workers supposedly begged Soviet Russia for aid, was it a call for solidarity or a calculated invasion? The Georgian army fought fiercely, but against overwhelming odds, Tbilisi fell in late February 1921. The Georgian Democratic Republic's government fled to France, leaving their homeland to become the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic. Independence lasted a fleeting 3 years. How fragile is freedom in the face of imperial ambition? The stage was set for irreversible change. Soviet rule arrived like a storm, bringing repression that shattered the soul of Georgia. Intellectuals were silenced, churches shuttered, monasteries turned into prisons and storage. Private property was seized, Collectivization shattered centuries-old rural traditions. Yet the Georgian spirit endured, adaptive, resilient, determined to survive in a system that demanded submission. Was this survival a quiet victory or a slow surrender? The paradox of endurance in a world built on lies began to take shape. Under Soviet dominion, Georgia transformed. Tbilisi blossomed into a bustling industrial and cultural hub. Georgian films, wine, and songs became renowned across the Soviet Union. But beneath the surface, the system's foundations were rotten with falsehoods. When the truth could no longer be hidden, the Soviet edifice began to crumble. The 80s brought Gorbachev's glasnost and perestroika, reform that loosened the noose, igniting old embers of independence. The question loomed: could the empire hold, or was its fall inevitable? On a cold day in April 1989, Tbilisi's heart was crushed. A peaceful demonstration for Georgian independence was met with brutal force. Soldiers wielded sapper shovels and unleashed poisonous gas. 21 lives were extinguished, hundreds wounded. Most victims were women. This massacre became a symbol, a grim revelation that Soviet power was beyond reform. The people's resolve hardened. The oppressive system must be torn down, no matter the cost. The battle for Georgia's soul was about to intensify. The dawn of 1990 saw Georgia step into the unknown with its first multi-party elections. Nationalists, led by the charismatic and radical Zviad Gamsakhurdia, a dissident and writer, seized power. By April 1991, Georgia declared independence, bold and unyielding, even as the USSR still clung to life. Yet history's cruel cycle repeated itself. Gamsakhurdia's leadership was marred by paranoia and authoritarianism, alienating minorities and igniting separatist fires in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Was this the price of freedom, or the birth of new chains? The fragile state spiraled into civil war. Ethnic tensions tore at the nation's fabric as regions rejected Tbilisi's authority. In January 1992, Gamsakhurdia was ousted, fleeing into exile, where he soon died under mysterious circumstances. Into the chaos stepped Eduard Shevardnadze, former Soviet foreign minister, promising stability but delivering corruption and decay. The nightmare of the 90s unfolded: economic collapse, shattered infrastructure, darkness for hours each day. Hunger, crime, despair consumed Georgia. Could this ravaged land rise again, or was it doomed to endless suffering? Territorial losses deepened the wounds. Abkhazia and South Ossetia slipped from Georgian control. Military attempts to reclaim these lands failed, displacing hundreds of thousands. A nation fractured, refugees scattered. Shevardnadze's reign dragged on until 2003, his government riddled with corruption, elections rigged, opposition crushed. The people's patience frayed, simmering beneath the surface, waiting to explode. How long before the weight of injustice snapped the chains? November 2003 brought a quiet revolution. The Rose Revolution. Peaceful protesters flooded the streets, clutching roses, not weapons, demanding Shevardnadze's resignation. They stormed the parliament, bold and unyielding. The old regime crumbled. Shevardnadze fled. Into the vacuum stepped Mikhail Saakashvili, young, fervent, wedded to a Western vision. He vowed reform, an end to corruption, and the restoration of Georgia's territorial integrity. But would new promises heal deep scars, or plunge the nation into another tempest? The fate of Georgia hung in the balance. What happens when hope clashes with impatience? When dreams of reclaiming lost lands spark a fire too fierce to control? Mikhail Saakashvili's early years in power held promise. The economy was growing, corruption was shrinking, and Georgia attracted eager investors. But impatience gnawed at him, a hunger to restore Abkhazia and South Ossetia by force burning in his veins. The stage was set for a fateful gamble. In August of 2008, Georgian troops launched an attempt to regain control over South Ossetia. This bold move ignited a swift and brutal response. Russian forces invaded. A fierce and devastating 5-day war shattered Georgia's hopes. The consequence was catastrophic. Russian troops occupied a significant portion of Georgian territory. The echoes of this conflict would echo far beyond the battlefield. Though Russian forces eventually withdrew, they did something even more damaging. They recognized Abkhazia and South Ossetia as independent states. For Georgia, this was a brutal blow. 20% of its land was lost. Hundreds of thousands of Georgians were forever displaced, their homes stolen, their lives uprooted. The nation stood fractured, its wounds raw and deep. Saakashvili's rule didn't last long after the war. By 2013, his leadership had morphed into an increasingly authoritarian regime. The opposition accused him of power abuses, and the political landscape grew darker. The turning point came in 2012 when the Georgian Dream Party, led by billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili, won the elections decisively. Saakashvili retreated into opposition, then exile, as Georgia's path shifted once again. Today, Georgia stands as an independent nation, striving for integration into the European Union and NATO. Its goal is recovery, economic growth, democratic development, cultural preservation, and above all, restoring territorial integrity. Yet the shadows of the past linger. Abkhazia and South Ossetia remain under Russian occupation. Corruption festers beneath the surface, and economic dependence on external markets threatens stability. The struggle is ongoing and fragile. But Georgians refuse to surrender. Their history is carved from survival, from the golden age of Colchis to the Christian legacy of Saint Nino, from Queen Tamar's empire to Russian conquest, from Soviet rule to hard-won independence. They have endured trials that would break most nations, yet their language, their faith, their identity survive intact. They've built a nation from the ruins of empires, a testament to resilience over conquest. So when you hear the polyphonic songs echoing through the mountainsides, or see ancient monasteries clinging to cliffs, or sip wine from clay jugs, you connect with a culture 3,000 years old, a culture that has outlasted wars, empires, and time itself. Georgian history is not merely a chain of events, it is a philosophy, one of relentless, non-aggressive resistance, deep and unwavering. Georgians have never been great conquerors like Rome or the Mongols. Instead, they have preserved themselves, and perhaps that is the greatest victory. When you think of Georgia, Don't focus solely on battles lost or won. Think of the vineyard that bursts anew every spring despite the harshest winters. Think of the church standing strong on a rock for a millennium, surviving countless earthquakes. Think of a language that sounds today much like it did in Rustavelli's time. Think of a people who have transformed suffering into culture, and culture into the very meaning of their existence. Georgia today is a land of striking contrasts, ancient fortresses shadowed by modern skyscrapers, Orthodox monasteries standing beside mosques and synagogues, tradition mingling with innovation. Georgian films win awards at international festivals. Georgian restaurants open in Paris, London, and New York. Georgian fashion, music, and art rise on the global stage. Georgia is no longer just an exotic country on Europe's edge. It is becoming visible, vital, influential. Yet the road to European integration is perilous and fraught with tension. Russia views Georgia's Western aspirations as a threat. It wields Abkhazia and South Ossetia as leverage, flexes military muscles near Georgia's borders, and supports pro-Russian factions inside the country. Georgian society is deeply divided. Some yearn for the West, others fear confrontation with Russia. Political instability simmers beneath the surface. The economy leans heavily on tourism and remittances from migrant workers, a fragile structure built on uncertain foundations. But Georgians are no strangers to adversity. Throughout their history, they have faced challenges that tested their very survival. And in every moment of crisis, they have chosen to fight, not with empire and conquest, but with endurance, identity, and unbreakable spirit. What does it mean to remember a past filled with pain without becoming trapped by it? How do you honor heroes without turning them into idols? These are the burning questions confronting modern Georgia, a nation caught between reverence and reckoning, between memory and survival. Georgia's people are no strangers to uncertainty. They have learned to adapt, to bend without breaking. But the challenge now is deeper: how to face the shadows of history. From the golden era of Queen Tamar to the brutal Soviet purges, from the civil wars of the 1990s to the August War of 2008, without repeating old mistakes. The stakes are nothing less than the nation's soul. The struggle to define identity reverberates through every corner of Georgian society. What truly makes a Georgian? Is it bloodline, citizenship, or something more elusive? With Armenians, Azerbaijanis, Ossetians, Russians, Greeks, Jews, all living side by side, this mosaic challenges the very idea of nationhood. How do you forge unity without erasing difference? No easy answers come from these questions. Georgia remains a laboratory of transition, a land striving to shed the iron grip of authoritarianism, to embrace democracy, to abandon a planned economy for the unpredictability of markets, to break free from isolation and step into the global arena. But every step forward invites setbacks, crises, scandals, retreats. Yet the process trudges onward, a testament to resilience. This is the story of a small country that refused to vanish. A nation battered by waves of conquerors, Roman legions standing on the banks of the Rioni River, Arab caliphates demanding submission, Mongol hordes burning cities, Persian shahs dragging away slaves, Russian generals redrawing borders, Soviet commissars shuttering churches. Each time, Georgia chose survival, not surrender. They made compromises when survival demanded it. They took up arms when no other choice remained. They hid forbidden books in shadows and sung songs when silence was enforced. This unyielding spirit carried them through centuries of darkness, and they survived. Today, the Georgian flag, a white banner emblazoned with the crimson cross of St. George and 4 smaller crosses, flies over Tbilisi. This symbol, rooted in the medieval past, was banned under Soviet rule and resurrected with independence. It stands for continuity, for a nation that was, is, and will be. The Georgian national anthem opens with words that are no exaggeration. My homeland, a jewel full of beauty. And beauty it is, not only in the rugged mountains, fertile valleys, flowing rivers, and ancient forests, but in the unbreakable spirit of its people, steadfast, hospitable, and filled with life, even in the face of relentless hardship. At the heart of Georgian culture lies the supra, the extended feast that lasts for hours. The table groans under the weight of food and wine, while the tamada, the toastmaster, raises glass after glass, weaving speeches that are poetic, philosophical, sometimes humorous, sometimes somber. This is not mere indulgence. It is communion, a sacred ritual of storytelling and connection, a living bridge between generations. Here, elders and children, men and women, natives and guests gather as equals. In this shared space, differences dissolve and a collective identity is forged. Georgian hospitality is legendary. The guest is sacred, a living embodiment of a proverb that says, a guest is from God. They are fed, cared for, cherished like family, because in these moments, survival is not just about endurance, but about belonging. Yet the questions linger like shadows in the candlelight. How to remember without getting stuck? How to unify without erasing? How to build a future from a past so scarred by war, repression, and pain? Georgia's story is far from finished. It is a daily struggle, a series of fateful decisions, a tightrope walk between hope and despair. If Georgia can survive, if it can find its way through the labyrinth of history and identity, then others in the post-Soviet world might follow. This is a nation writing its future with every choice it makes, refusing to disappear, refusing to surrender. The legacy of those who came before is heavy, but the will to endure is heavier still. What does it mean to face a destiny where every choice reverberates through centuries? How does a small nation survive when empires rise and fall around it? Georgia's story is not just history. It's a relentless battle for identity, a testament carved into mountains and hearts alike. But what happens when the ancient traditions clash with harsh realities? Hospitality in Georgia is not a mere custom. It is a sacred vow. To welcome a guest is to invite blessing and honor, opening not just doors, but the very souls of its people. This is the essence of being Georgian, a fierce pride woven into everyday life. Yet, Beneath this warmth lies a country scarred by wounds that have never healed. Poverty grips many homes. Unemployment shadows the young. Corruption and political strife tear at the fragile fabric of society. Families displaced from Abkhazia and South Ossetia endure unimaginable hardship, while war veterans bear both visible and invisible scars. Each of these realities pulls at the nation's pulse. How long can resilience hold before it snaps? And yet the story refuses to end in despair. Hope surges beneath the surface like a roaring river, unstoppable and bold. Young people leave, seeking light beyond the borders, while those who remain fight tirelessly to reshape their homeland's fate. This struggle defines Georgia, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Picture standing atop Mount Kazbek, clouds swirling beneath your feet, feeling the ancient power of the land pulse through your veins. Imagine stepping into the shadowed halls of Svetitsko Cathedral, where shafts of light break through narrow windows, illuminating centuries of faith and endurance. Hear the haunting polyphony echoing through Tbilisi's old courtyards. Taste the earth's spirit in wine pressed from a traditional qvevri. This is Georgia, a state of being, a fierce declaration of soul against the storm. Georgia teaches the world brutal lessons about survival. It shows how a small people can stand unwavering against empires bent on erasure. It reveals that culture wields a power greater than armies, that memory is both shield and sword. Faith here is no blind obedience. It is a conscious, defiant act of will. Independence is not a gift. It is the outcome of unyielding labor across generations. Every day, a new page in Georgia's history is written, by soldiers and peasants, scholars and artists, mothers and children. Each decision echoes with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of what lies ahead. The future remains a battlefield, yet amid chaos, Georgia stands tall, rooted in its mountains and traditions, singing its songs and fermenting its wine. From the golden shores of Colchis to the fierce fights for freedom, thousands of years have passed, yet the essence remains unchanged. Georgians fight. Georgians endure. Georgians remain themselves. This is their message to the world. No matter how small or silenced, every nation deserves its place under the sun. Every voice, no matter how faint, must be heard. Every forgotten land holds stories worthy of eternity. And so, as this epic tale draws to a close, remember, Georgia is not just a land on a map. It is a soul that refuses to fade. It is a lesson in courage, in resilience, in the power of identity against overwhelming odds. A living testament that, despite the fiercest storms, the spirit endures. If